Talent development or learning and development, I feel it's a key player in creating that inclusive culture.
My name is Katharina, and I'm the Community and Event Manager at eCulture, a company that is on a mission to shape the world of unbiased hiring. Welcome to the Oops, I'm Biased podcast. Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of my conversation with Adina Avram on the DEIB in the employee lifecycle. Last time we got stuck on the talent management portion. I asked a question that is a very long one, so we're going to cover the second part of it at the start of this episode. To go back, we were covering how DEIB fits into the talent management equation in general, and looking specifically at talent management processes and how DE&I can be implemented there. We left off with performance management and performance assessments. So I want to go a little bit deeper into seeing what else is there to uncover in talent management in DE&I.
In addition to PDRs, right, as part of the talent processes, we have talent reviews, 9-box, succession planning, just to name a few. These are the most common in different organizations. Some organizations choose to skip the 9-box and succession plannings, especially if they are more dynamic and their employees are rotating at a faster speed. More traditional organizations are still having this as part of their assessment. I have my own opinions on this, but I guess what is more important here is as long as we do have these processes to try to reduce bias as much as possible. You probably heard me throughout my interview saying reduce bias, because I think it's not possible to eliminate bias. We are all humans, so inevitably all these processes will be biased. So the goal is to reduce as much as possible. And again, as I mentioned also for the recruitment, I think education and awareness is a big part of this bias reduction process. In addition to educating the assessing committees, having that diverse calibration committee is also extremely important. Making sure that we diversify our talent pool is also very important, again, also in the succession planning. So let's look deeper in the organization, and also if you're a multinational organization, look not only to have the succession planning done within the business unit or department, but also try to look cross-department, cross-region to ensure as much as possible the diversification and exposure of different levels in the organizations to the process. Whenever possible, allow yourself longer time. I know these processes tend to happen in 1-2 days. In most companies, if possible, allow yourself to have this process extended so you have proper time to create assessment metrics and also to diversify the data points that you are using. These are, again, just a few examples for these processes.
How would you then define talent development? What does your role come into it, and how do you see that connection with DE&I as well?
Mm-hmm. So talent development or learning and development, I feel it's a key player in creating that inclusive culture. So it's absolutely crucial to have, as part of all DI or all learning initiatives and programs, an element of DIB. So when we look at, for example, onboarding at Trivium, we added a course also on what inclusive culture is, and a bit of awareness around biases and our expectations from the new colleagues. So then we know that everyone who starts in the organization directly starts with at least a basic understanding of DIB. And we have also integrated this course as part of onboarding for shop floor workers. So we really covered the full organization. When it comes to learning and development offerings or catalog in general, we also work by the 70-20-10 model. So when we look at on-the-job training, we also implement, for example, rotation programs. And in the rotation programs, we also look at matching employees not only based on the job function, but also based on diversity criteria. So this can be an example where we further expose our employees to different cultures and ways of working. Then when we look at the 20 part, which is coaching and mentoring, we have started in our EAA region mentorship program focused on DIB. So the way how the program was set up by our regional colleagues was to have on a monthly basis, have a session which contains some DIB topic. And this can be focused on change management, on inclusive culture, on inclusive leadership practices. And the sessions last approximately 1-2 hours, 1.5 hours, depending on the session. And also how we are mapping the mentors and mentees are taking into consideration different diversity elements. And this can be age, nationality, ethnicity, and different other backgrounds, age. So it's important to embed DIB elements and practices at everything in every single curriculum or program that we are rolling out. And of course, then we have the 10%, which is the actual training. And this is where we deliver trainings as part of onboarding, but also throughout the employee life cycle. As part of our leadership development program, we have elements of diversity and inclusion. And what I personally try to do is not to have too much singled out DIB trainings, but have DIB elements implemented throughout every program. So, for example, instead of having a full 2-3 hours curriculum on DIB one time, which maybe it's being forgotten afterwards, I include, for example, DIB elements or bias content as part of the PDR training, or bias content as part of maybe health and safety trainings or well-being training. So we try to embed at every step something linked with DIB to help us further improve and accelerate the implementation of and adoption of an inclusive culture.
You already partially answered my following question, which is one of my favorite things that my guests do. They already guess what I'm going to say. You talked, I think you spoke quite eloquently about the fact that if you give a DE&I training once, that will be forgotten by the time they leave the door. It doesn't really stick. It doesn't really lead to any further reflection. Would you say then that the best way that organizations can design and implement inclusive talent development programs is to implement it and sort of slot it into existing trainings and existing initiatives and programs that are already running?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So if we have, for example, a coaching program, then have at least one training about inclusive communication, for example. Or if we are delivering a training for customer support, maybe include a little bit of content of how to deal with different personalities or different cultures, or maybe some intercultural awareness training. If you are delivering a sales training, our sales representatives have to deal with different type of people, personalities. So they are directly exposed to a diverse world. But oftentimes diverse sales trainings don't include anything around diversity and inclusion or diversity elements. So this is a great opportunity to fill in that gap and embed a little bit of DIB in everything that we do. So it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be very difficult, but a little bit of content here and there goes a long way. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention is when we talk about diversity in learning and development, is not just about the content, but also about delivery methods. So when we deliver different content, it's important to accommodate for different learning needs and learning styles, right? So some people learn better if they hear the content. So in such situation, it's good to maybe offer podcasts or maybe share content that is recorded. Some people are learning better if they see the content. So in this case, written materials or booklets or brochures or with content or news on the intranet, or a combination of both by videos. Some people like to attend longer trainings and be in class. Some people prefer shorter information bites. So depending on the learning needs and styles, it's also important to be flexible and accommodate for different learning solutions.
Yeah, that was, I think, also something that might ring true for many of our listeners as well, to think about the audience that you have, think about what you're trying to achieve, and how you can be inclusive in your delivery. So I think a wonderful point that you made there. I do think that we covered everything that is with regards to talent development and L&D. I would love to now move on to our last point, which is exit. Why is DE&I so important when it comes to the end of an employee life cycle?
So as part of the exit process, I think it's very important to collect also data on DIB and how inclusive employees felt within the organization. Employees tend to be more open and transparent when they are leaving, especially if the surveys are confidential. So I believe it would be a missed opportunity not to ask a few culture-related questions. Did they felt a true sense of belonging? Did they felt included? Did they felt safe to speak up, to be their authentic self? All these are very valuable questions that can help us collect data and also understand what worked well and what we can continue to improve.
Yeah, I think you touched on a very common one, an exit survey. Do you also think that it could be beneficial to do an exit interview with someone, or might that actually be hurting hearing very sort of outright what the person thought of the inclusivity of the culture and the DE&I in general in an organization?
Yeah, well, I think there is not one way that fits all organizations. Depending on how safe the employee feels, I believe it will also reflect in their questions. So if you have an organization culture where employees feel safe to be authentic, if you have a strong feedback culture, then yes, I think it's valuable to have an exit interview as well. So you can ask follow-up questions and get a better understanding on really truly what went wrong and what went well. In the same time, some employees might not feel safe to speak up and they might not want to burn bridges. So they could choose to answer very openly in a confidential exit survey, but not so openly in an interview. So I guess it really depends on the organizational culture and each individual case.
Yeah, and also for everyone listening, keeping that sort of in mind, that it's a bit of a case by case in what will yield the best results. Depending on how safe they feel with sharing. Are there any specific measures organizations can take to learn from employees? We mentioned now interviews, but also exit surveys. What should companies then look out for in terms of what the data it is that they're collecting from exit surveys or interviews?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Can you maybe expand on it?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Now we talked about surveys being really important or exit interviews.
Yeah.
Are there any specific questions that you think should be included from a DE&I perspective to really learn about or sort of get the most out of these exit interviews and surveys to improve DEIB strategy?
Mm-hmm. Well, a few questions that I can think of would be, for example, rate your overall satisfaction with the diversity and inclusion activities, practices that have taken place. rate your overall sense of belonging or sense of safety to show up authentically. You could also leave open comments for them to give an advice, right? Like what would be a few suggestions that you would recommend for us that we could further work on to improve on. So these are just a few. I would move a little bit away from diversity questions and I would focus more on inclusion and belonging. So what is the sentiment that they have? Because that sentiment is also the sentiment that they will talk about when they leave the organization. Yeah. So definitely questions focused on measuring feelings, belonging, safety. Yeah. These are just a few examples on the top of my head.
Great examples. Thank you for sharing. We are nearing the end of this episode, which to me pains me a little bit because I'm enjoying learning from you so much. But I'd love to recap our conversation in sort of broad strokes a little bit and ask you overall, where do you see the impact of the implementation of DEIB and what that impact is for organizations if you look at the whole employee lifecycle?
Yeah. So definitely DIB can have a very, very strong impact in retention and engagement. Just to give you an example from Trivium, we are fairly at an early stage. So fairly young when it comes to DIB principle or adoption of DIB. We started our efforts only in January 2023 in a more strategic way. But already within 1 year of implementation of DIB, we've noticed 2% increase in employee retention, 2% increase in attracting female talents, and a 10% increase in a positive impact or positive assessment when it comes to organizational culture. So this is 1 year of work with not a very big budget and only focused on improving debiasing the employee life cycle, setting up employee resource groups and organizing internal activities. So this is just the beginning, and already the rewards or the return on investment is extremely high. I can only imagine when we mature more in the area and where we have a bigger impact from DIB angle perspective, but also HR, that these numbers will only grow up. These are data specific for Trivium packaging, but there is a lot of data out there that shows and proves the business case around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So the business case is clear. I guess now it's more a matter of how we implement that business case, and are we ready and willing to act?
Yeah, thank you for sharing those numbers. I think they give. They paint quite a hopeful picture for our audience in saying how much you can achieve in 1 year. I think if we look at how much can change in 1 year, how much you can implement, and how much you've done at Trivium, I think it's wonderful to see as well how much impact there can be in such a short time with organizations that are quite big. I think it's always easy to change a lot and see a lot of impact in smaller organizations, but especially for people working at big corporates, multinationals, I think it's wonderful to see that there's organization championing and sort of spearheading that transition. My last question now is about best practices and tips. This is my favorite question to ask any guest. Let us know what your best practices and tips are on implementing DIB in the employee lifecycle.
Okay. Well, I shared quite a few already, but to sum it up, I guess my advice to any HR or organization in general, because I don't want to place DIB only in HR. At Trivium, DIB is part of HR, but it doesn't have to be part of HR. So I guess my advice to every organization would be to hire a professional who has the knowledge and the skills to implement DIB, because it makes a big difference, and the business case and return of investment is there. So it's just a matter of having the will and having the intention of making a change. If you cannot afford, and that's okay, it happens, you cannot afford a professional focus on DIB, hire a consultant or a short-term temporary person who can advise you on the strategy and direction, and then you can take on the implementation part. And if you really don't have time for that either, and that's absolutely fine, start small. And my advice would be to move away a little bit from diversity and inclusion events, and take that effort and put it in optimizing your processes, in educating your employees, in creating engagement internally with your employees. And also at times you can partner up with your customers and clients and team up and join resources to make a positive impact. We have done this in my previous company, where we teamed up with one of our clients and with the municipality of Amsterdam to create a joint awareness program to create a more positive impact in society. So it's not always a matter of having the resources as much as having the willingness and the passion and the drive to make change. And for the HR professionals, because we were talking about the employee life cycle, for the HR professionals, try to look at your functional area and do some research on how you can integrate better DIB practices in your functional area. So if you work in reward and recognition, try to see how you can debias the process. If you work in learning and development, how you can apply inclusive learning strategies for all, and so on, so forth. So just because you don't have a budget or a person responsible to drive the DIB agenda on a strategic level doesn't mean that individually in a small scale we cannot each of us have a positive impact. So start small, start big, doesn't matter, just start taking some action.
And with that, I think that's a wonderful way to end our two-part episode. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your expertise with all of our audience. I learned a lot from you. I do think that our audience will too. Looking forward already to receiving messages from everyone. Please go ahead and connect with Adina on LinkedIn. I don't think that she would mind you sending her a follow-up question, comment, feedback, anything that you have to share. And if you need a keynote speaker, a consultant, you do know where to find her in the links as well. With that said, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, Adina. I did, definitely.
I did very much. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
And for everyone who listened today, thank you so much for tuning in again. Don't forget that we post bi-weekly, so there'll be another episode in 2 weeks' time. And I really hope to see you back in our next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.